All right, welcome back to the Launch School podcast. Today we have John and Adam Isom, brothers who went through Launch School Core plus Capstone at the same time, but not simultaneously. They were in different Capstone cohorts. So how are you guys doing today, Adam and John?
Great to be here. This is Adam.
Yeah, this is John. Good to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, awesome. And it's really interesting to have your story here because you went through it kind of together, but at different paces. And you both did Capstone, both ended up kind of coincidentally at the same company. And so you're working at the same company now. But before we get that, let's talk about a little bit about your background and sort of just general introduction.
Okay, this is Adam. I had aspirations of being a software engineer for multiple years before I started Launch School. I took a couple courses when I did my first bachelor's in psychology, and I learned a little more on the side. And I also did a coding boot camp a few years ago.
Oh, you did? What year was that?
That would have been early to mid 2016.
Okay. And that was just like a traditional 3-month or 4-month boot
Yeah,
camp?
it was a traditional boot camp.
Okay. And so after that, you didn't get a job or didn't feel like you were qualified or something that prompted you to end up at Launch School, right?
Yeah, that's right. I was going through some personal stuff during that boot camp, and just overall, I didn't feel qualified for a job. And so I didn't bother looking, which interestingly, and unprompted for you, but I pointed out this a few times on online forums, means that I was excluded from their stats, which I've always thought is not a super honest way for them to compute their stats.
You're talking about the boot camp that you finished.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. Yep. So after that, I took some time to get my bearings on life, and I started a job outside of programming. Although over a couple of years, I got into positions that were increasingly closer to programming. I worked as a business analyst. That was my last job, looking at code and talking to programmers a lot. But I definitely wasn't satisfied with that job for a few reasons. So I decided to pursue an online bachelor's in computer science after learning about Western Governors University's program.
Wow. So this is 2017, maybe 18 now or 17?
18. Yeah, this is actually, I don't think I started the degree until, it was late 2018. I started that online degree at the time.
So working as an analyst and then concurrently doing your online bachelor's in computer science.
That's right. So I did that for a little while.
You already have a bachelor's, right? This is your second bachelor's.
That's right. I do. Bachelor's in psychology.
So how did you get to Launch School then?
Yeah. So I don't know how I learned about Launch School, but when I did, it wasn't something I was willing to really dive into and look at and commit at the time. This would have been a few years ago, probably. So I did what I do with a lot of things that I find online. I bookmarked it to review later. I was pretty excited about the prospect of getting into programming as a profession before I really gave Launch School a second serious look. So I helped John get into it as well in high school, and he'll talk more about that.
Okay, that's interesting. Well, yeah, we'll pause here a little bit. So this is where you told John, actually, so you found Launch School, Adam, but you didn't really take any further action. And then you told John, who was at the time still in high school?
I didn't tell John about Launch School. I saw that he might be interested in programming as well. So I tried teaching him a little with the little knowledge that I had.
And how many years older are you? So you're 2016, you were doing a boot camp, but you graduated a little bit before that.
That's right. Yeah, I'm 10 years older than him. So yeah, so at the time he was still finishing high school, about 17, then I would have been 27.
And you're 27. Okay, yeah. So yeah, maybe we'll switch over to John then. So John's in high school, was a junior or senior at this point? And
yeah, so this is John. I was a senior in high school. Yeah, Adam was teaching me a little bit, on evenings and weekends. We were looking at some cool, free learn to code resources together, learning JavaScript and that sort of thing. And it was kind of fun. At around that same time, I also took a course in my senior year of high school for programming and, participated in a 24-hour coding camp. And that was a lot of fun. And I kind of realized, this is a pretty good career. as far as they go. It's the bar isn't super high. You earn a good income, and there's the ability to move up and keep learning more and getting into these better paying roles. Plus, programming itself is just a little bit meditative and fun in its own regard.
So how did you come across launch school eventually? I mean, eventually you two must have talked about it at some point.
Yeah, so this was in the summer of 2019 after I graduated from high school. So I just graduated a few months earlier. And so I was over with Adam, and we were doing a little bit of, study. He introduced me to launch school. This was about a month, I'd say, before I was set to start attending the University of Utah in a Bachelor's of Computer Science program.
Oh,
So
wow. So you were that, so this was, if school starts in August, this would have been like July that summer before you're supposed to start your freshman year of college?
yeah, it would have been probably about mid to late July.
Wow. I did not know it was that close. So within like a month, you decided to not go to college?
Yeah, so that's the funny thing. I was already accepted. I had a scholarship in the honors program, pre-admitted to that. So I was going to attend because the University of Utah has a good computer science program as far as the universities in the state go. But yeah, Adam kind of sent a link my way. He told me a little bit about launch school, and I
And at the
listened.
time, he wasn't even enrolled in launch school. He just bookmarked it, right? Is that right?
Yeah. This is Adam. I did just bookmark it. This was part of an ongoing conversation I had with John, where I was saying, maybe you don't need to go to college. There are these various options. And then based on, John's personality and what I personally liked, when I reread that launch school bookmark, I thought this might be a good one for him.
Interesting. So what did your parents say about this idea? I mean, skipping college is a pretty big deal, especially if it's like a month prior to your expected start date.
Yeah, so this is John again. So once I looked into launch school a little bit more and began to seriously weigh that option compared to university, and decided I'd actually like to go ahead and pursue launch school instead, I kind of talked to my dad. He's actually very understanding and encouraging of me in that regard. And
Wow, that's good.
yeah, so he trusted that I found a good program, and he looked at it a little bit too and didn't see anything alarming there. And I also had to convince my grandmother, lived with at the time, because she wanted me to go to university. She wants all of her grandchildren to do well,
Sure, yeah.
obviously. And going to college and getting that degree and getting a good job is one of those things that she just wants for us and thinks it's good. And so I had a little bit of a tougher time convincing her, but
And you were like 18 at the time, or just trying to convince your grandmother that you're going to do this like crazy online program instead of, you got a honors program at a good university? That must have been, I don't know how that conversation, I think for me, like, I don't think I would have been able to do that at 18 years old. Like, they must really trust you to even entertain that conversation.
Yeah, well, I mean, the choice just made sense when I compared the two, like the opportunity cost of lost income for not working for a few years, the price, the tuition on one versus the other, and as well as the quality of education and the direct applicability of it in launch school seemed a little bit higher than computer science generally for like web development and software engineering.
Yeah, I think it's obviously when you run the numbers, it feels like it makes sense, but I feel like the sort of default inertia or momentum, especially for very capable high school graduates, is to push people to college, right? And so to even if it makes sense, it's like you still have to have a certain out of the box thinking to deviate from that just tremendous momentum to push you towards college. I'm just kind of wondering where that came from. Was it just as simple as I'm going to run the numbers and whatever the numbers say? If that's the case, why didn't you do that like sophomore year in high school? Say, well, I'm 16, I'll just start working now instead of finishing high school. Does that make sense? Like there's a there's a default that I think we all feel when we're at that age.
Yeah.
But you were able to somehow like kind of think beyond that, which I think is hard and unconventional.
I can't exactly remember my line of thought back then. That was about 2 years ago.
Ancient times.
In comparison. But yeah. But it wasn't, but I also, that decision, it wasn't just running the numbers. I also had to weigh, okay, I'm going to be substituting university, substituting that and doing launch school instead. And that has its own implications.
So we had one other person before you, Tanner Allard, who also was in this podcast, I think season 1 or season 2, I forget which season, but he talked about his path. I think he was a little bit, he actually went to college, I think for a year and a half or so. But when he found launch school, he came to a similar idea that he didn't have to finish college to get a great job. And he actually went through Capstone, got a great job, and actually got his bachelor's in computer science afterwards while making, over 6 figures. Did that play a role at all in your thinking here, in that like somebody else around your age, I think he was a little bit older, like 20 or so, and you're 18. Did that help?
So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That makes me remember. I actually did look at, so he wrote like a blog post on like Hacker Noon or Medium or one of those platforms. And I read it, and it's quite interesting because here was another guy. He was young, maybe like 20, maybe 21. He was doing school, decided to drop out, do launch school, and then ended up getting a great job and then pursuing his bachelor's after. And that kind of made it a little bit more real to me that, yeah, this is an actual path that I can take. Somebody's already done it before and they've been successful in it.
Right. Yeah. And I think from a mathematical standpoint, I think this is definitely a valid path. Like even for you, John, now you're on the other side of making 6 figures, right? You're and also you're enrolled in a computer science program. So like your high school classmates might think, well, we'll have a college degree and you won't, but that's not true, right? You're just sort of doing it concurrently while working, while paying for your degree.
Yeah. So it's like get the 100K, the 6-figure job first, and then get your degree later while you're making that good money. And it actually turns out I'll probably end up graduating about the same time they would, or within a year or 2.
Yeah. And that's great that you saw Tanner's path and basically replicated it. Like it actually happened for you exactly the same way, which is great. I think I recall talking to your dad because I was a little uncomfortable with how young you were, and I didn't want you to make a rash decision. And I remember, I don't know what I was expecting, maybe like a brainstorming session, but he was just like, yeah, no, I trust John. Whatever John thinks, I'm good. I was like, oh, wow.
Hey, this is Adam. Just to fill in the pieces a little bit, John has been more the golden child than the rest of his siblings. So that's one reason his dad and his grandma were more willing to trust him. He was just an upstanding citizen in high school, like a drum major for his marching band. Another puzzle piece here is John wanted to do engineering, proper engineering, actually, before he turned towards computer science. And I think I played a role in that I was just sort of kept hammering this idea that software engineers actually make more money. I've always been enamored by the big picture sort of things. I've been a reader of Hacker News for a long time, and it's just been apparent to me for years before I got into the field that software is eating the world. This is the career for the future. When you were to pick just one career, other engineering fields are more or less stagnant, relatively speaking. And it's become increasingly a world where you don't need a degree. So I was a little bit preaching that gospel to maybe precede before I do remember I suggested to him, maybe you don't need to go to college to do software. And, he didn't want to do that. But after learning some more, taking a course and excelling at that course in high school, he actually, I think, got the first prize in that hackathon on a team. He started coming more around to that idea. And then I was actually a little surprised as well that he just made that decision right before college. I was pretty proud of that.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure for me because I think I know what I'm doing, but when people are making such dramatic life decisions, I'm always reminded of what a serious responsibility that is, right? So when Tanner did the same thing, dropped out of college to launch school, John's not going to, giving up a scholarship, giving up, a great program to do launch school, there's just a lot of responsibility, I feel. And so I just feel like, I have to make sure you know what you're getting into, make sure that, we do the best thing we can to put you in the best position possible. Yeah, I'm glad it worked out.
I want to add that if Adam had not been preaching the gospel, so to speak, or kind of like exposing me to software and these alternate paths and this sort of thing, I probably would have ended up going to university and getting like an engineering degree or something. But Adam has been very helpful in that way and kind of showing me these novel new ideas that I didn't really know existed and kind of expanding my view.
I love what you just said because I am not one of those like anti-college people, right? I think college is great. It can be great, but it is overprescribed, right? It is overprescribed as a solution for every scenario. I think there's a lot of people in the world who judge success based on attending college. That's not the measure of success. It's like what you do afterwards, like in my opinion, right? It's kind of like in the startup world, the measure of success is how much funding you can close versus what kind of product you build, what kind of customers you're serving. So I love that you're able to kind of see beyond that and see a different path. And again, you're not skipping college, quote unquote. You're just doing it in a different order, right? You're actually when do you finish? Are you done with your degree, John, or are you almost where you're going to finish?
So I'm working through it with WGU, Western Governors University, as well, online right now. My first term is just closing up here. So I'm still working through it. I'm probably about a third of the way through it right now.
And
I've
that's
been
the
working
program
on it.
Adam was in prior to finding launch school, right? And Adam, you're further along, I guess, or you
That's
done?
right. I'm mostly done.
mostly
Hopefully finishing up by the end of September.
We should do a compare and contrast, or just your opinions on it, like maybe towards the end. But first, I want to maybe skip over to your story, Adam. So far, where we left off was you didn't really commit to launch school yet, but John did. After just looking at it for a month before he was supposed to attend college, he did, and he committed to launch school. And then you were still in what position, Adam? You're still attending computer science courses and not really looking at launch school seriously yet, or where were you there?
That's right. I'm sure I talked about launch school with John while he was looking at it. I don't really recall, but at the time I was working full time and studying part time with the WGU program. So I wasn't starting to go through launch school, right? John started just going through it right away, and I didn't, and I couldn't. But I did sense that, it's a special opportunity to study alongside my brother when we're both clearly interested in some of the same things, like programming. And so I looked into launch school some more after he committed. And I almost right away, I decided when I was going to quit my job, even if I didn't quit that, right away. I quit within 2 months. Yeah, it was about two months after.
So you quit your job to do launch school?
I
2 months
did.
after John started? Wow. Okay. And then were you still doing your computer science program simultaneously? So you're just focused on learning then, your computer science program and launch school, and no job.
That's right. I thought at first I thought I would simultaneously do them for few more months because I was in the middle of a Western Governors term, which are 6 months long. But after, I don't know, a couple weeks of launch school, I realized that I wanted to just commit to launch school, and I would just have to forget about finishing some more courses that Western Governors term because it was just slowing me down too much. Funny thing, when I started launch school, I started one of the more intensive Western Governors courses, and it took me over 3 weeks full time, developing a couple of 1,000-line Python project. And it wasn't super fun because it was really a little bit, it was just too much of a stretch for my ability. The Western Governor program is meant more for working professionals. So I was able to muddle through it, but it was painful, and it was clear that I wasn't doing it in a way that I was happy with. Like the actual programming, I wasn't systematic enough, hadn't mastered the fundamentals enough, and so on. So I decided to focus full-time on launch school after that 3-week-long project.
Wow. So you made a similar decision that John did then, just a few months later, kind of like foregoing now your second bachelor's, but still foregoing a bachelor's program to focus on launch school.
Yeah, exactly. And there was a bit of sort of sunk cost that I gave up. I'd already got a loan for that term in school, but I realized that given law school's graduate statistics, I was still probably better off just forgetting about it.
That's pretty gutsy. Sort of both of you, like kind of, pushing aside the computer science programs to focus on launch school. Was it just like our stats or our results, or just kind of going through the John's gone through a couple courses at this point, maybe just seeing sort of like, okay, this is not fake, right? This is like real training or something like that.
Yeah, so this is John. So a lot of it was the stats, the reporting of that, and also a lot of personal anecdotes that I've heard, namely Tanner Allard. But also the quality of the curriculum kind of spoke for itself, because before I signed up and like committed to launch school, I went through the prep work first, and it was exceptionally high quality compared to anything I'd ever gone through before. And the same is true for the very first paid course as well. And I felt that this is well worth it, and I was in good hands in that sense.
This is Adam again. I've done beginner coding material resources a few times, like free code camp for a few $100. I've done this a false start 2 or 3 times in the past, including at bootcamp. So although I can't remember the specifics right now, I noticed a lot of small things, right, about the intro curriculum, because at that point I was comfortable with the very basics of programming, so I could focus more on reflecting on how the curriculum was structured and the choices that were made pedagogically. And I don't know, I was just really impressed. So that was a factor for me as well.
I didn't know that both of you actually made these choices. It was really interesting to hear that parallel. So how was it working through core together, but not through the same material? Sort of, Adam, I guess you're a little bit behind John at this point. How did that, was there advantage, disadvantage, like studying together, even though you're looking at different topics and maybe at a different pace?
So this is Adam. Looking through rose-colored glasses, so to speak, it was basically the best time ever, getting to study launch school all day, not having to worry about anything else. John and we lived with our grandma, so I had to do my separate job of convincing her that I thought this program was going to work out for me, right? I quit my job. So I guess I can be persuasive at times. But anyway, I managed to convince her, and it did all work out. My grandma lives right next to a university campus, actually where I got my first degree. John and we would bike up every morning at like 7 a.m., right? Like right after sunrise. And we would bike up to the main library on campus and just find our happy place, just find a secluded alcove and just study there all day. Mm-hmm. We would pack peanut butter sandwiches, not fancy, but it's sort of asceticism that I can go in for sometimes, mm-hmm. right? That was life. It was just studying law school, eating peanut butter sandwiches in the evenings, sometimes playing tennis or watching like James Bond or Westworld. And it was a good life for that whole time going through core.
Mm-hmm. It's just when you only have one, this is John, by the way, when you just like being able to devote all of my energy and time into launch school, it's kind of a unique circumstance, I take it. Most people, they have other obligations and responsibilities to attend to, like a family or work or that sort of thing. But I had the luxury of being able to go through launch school and solely through launch school and just worry about almost nothing else, just kind of getting sucked in. And it was just, yeah, it was fantastic. It was a great experience going up together, studying in the same place. We might not have been in the exact same spot in the curriculum, but going up and studying together and not really worrying about anything else, that was fun. And I think that did help me get through the entirety of the core curriculum.
I mean, that sounds like you basically crafted your own idyllic college experience, because that's basically, the dream college experience, right? Study and then play tennis and then watch James Bond. Pretty much what we all hope for in that experience. So John, you maintained your pace. Do you remember how long it took you to finish core, doing it full time?
Yeah, so I started core, about the middle or end of August? It took me, if I recall,
19 August?
Say
Or tell me,
again?
what year, August?
Oh,
Do you remember?
2019, sorry,
Right.
2019 of late August and to the beginning of September. And I went through the core curriculum in about 8.5 months. I think I finished the core curriculum in about mid-April.
And then you did the May capstone
Yeah,
cohort.
and then after that, I did the capstone cohort that started in mid-May.
Okay, and then Adam, obviously a few months behind you, wasn't able to make that one, but didn't make the following cohort. So so both of you were doing launch school, but sort of maintaining that same pace of you being a few months ahead. It sounds like.
This is Adam. Yeah, that's right. John was about 2 months. I started launch school early October of 2019, but I was still doing WGU at the time. So I effectively started late October of 2019. And
Okay.
yeah, and then I finished core, let's see, when was that? I don't
Must
know,
have been
about 9 to
August.
10 months later.
Maybe August. So it sounds like you also took like 8 or 9 months
Yeah,
to finish
yeah.
core, and then you did the fall cohort, which started in September.
Yeah, the fall 2020 cohort finishing up around January, February of 21.
Yeah, and this is John. I'd like to add that we were studying launch school full time, more than 40 hours a week most weeks. So because we didn't have anything else on our plate, it was just fun. We just went out and we studied maybe 50 hours a week, 60 hours in some cases, and that's one reason we were able to finish quite quickly. And it's also
Was having each other like an advantage, you feel, or did it feel like because we have other I've recorded other podcasts with sort of groups of people, and they've always said it's been helpful to have other people, but they were going the same pace. They were kind of pulling each other along. If someone were going a little bit faster, they would kind of pull the other people along. But you two are not that case. You didn't really wait for each other. You just kind of go at your own pace. Was that still okay in terms of working with each other and just keeping each other motivated?
This is Adam. Yeah, I think it was fantastic to study side by side. I'll get back to that. John didn't want to be held up. I'm sure I brought it up once or twice. It'd be really cool to do capstone together, but John's ambitious and he wanted to go as fast as possible.
I didn't want to wait. Yeah.
Yeah. But sometimes I wonder how people can manage to push themselves through something this big without somebody doing it with somebody in some sense.
Yeah.
And that's really strong, because I think that any significant change, any significant commitment that's out of the box is a lot easier with someone else.
Yeah, and we were kind of accountability partners in that aspect, making sure we both show up every day. I mean, we lived together, we went to the same places together, so that made it a lot easier that way. The default became going out and studying together, which is quite helpful. And I know that trying to do something like that by yourself is going to be a lot more challenging since you have to rely solely on yourself.
Yeah.
It's just helpful to have that, that partner to do things with.
Yeah. The default action, the default environment, right? If you're by yourself, the default might be just browsing YouTube or whatever, right? Watching TV. Whereas if you're in a study group, then the default is hopefully studying. So yeah, I see this all the time. I think definitely for most people, having a group is important. And this is why I think one of the most underrated aspect of launch school is community, right? Community people, dedicated people who are serious about studying, who want to become good students, if not already are. But there are, everyone's life situation is different. Sometimes people have families and kids and jobs, and so they have to maintain a schedule. They have 3 hours a day that they've set aside, and that's it, right? And if other people can fit in those 3 hours, then they'll work with them. If they can't, then they'll work by themselves. So, but yeah, I do think working as a group is definitely the best. The cost is, more time, more commitment, not less, right?
Right. Yeah, this is Adam. Yeah, that's right. I'm sure it would have been much more difficult if for me if I had been married, had a kid, and so on. But I was lucky in that way, and I'm amazed that some people still make it work. And you're absolutely right about default environment. I think that's a critical point that I've always paid attention to. Yeah, you got to make it work for you one way or another, setting up the right habits and system. One thing I wanted to ask you about, Chris, is just if you think that it would be appropriate to give a quick blurb about the spot community that did not exist when John went through or when I went through. I've only been keeping very minimal tabs on it, and I've been very impressed by this, by the community of students that have been more and more self-organizing into study groups. Have you done a podcast with spot leaders yet?
That's forthcoming. That's forthcoming for sure. And definitely want to highlight the spot for anybody listening who is not aware of that. That's our peer organized study sessions, and they're very organized. They're very professional, and they're doing a great job because there's only so many slots that our staff can fit in terms of study sessions, right? It's not going to fit. We have a worldwide community with different time zones and all that. So the spot has stepped in nicely, and yeah, one of the major goals is to help facilitate community, help facilitate peer-to-peer learning. This is the place to do it. I think, I'll put it out there. I think we have the best community around in terms of study. Every community has a culture, and I believe ours is one of studiousness. And in my opinion, that attribute, studiousness, is what employers are looking for. So the fact that we have so many people here focused on that attribute is a huge advantage. And if you're here at launch school, take advantage of it. Yeah. And I think not having that, there's a reason why we added it, or there's a reason why it came to be, right? Because so many people were kind of in need of this. So I'm looking forward to having it grow more and more and supporting it, and definitely bringing the organizers onto the launch school podcast.
And I do want to point out, the one thing though, is some existing programs, they try to get away with just having peers teach each other. And I'm a little skeptical on that. I think I found the foundation of having your assessments is important and a significant investment that some programs might skip over. But I'm really glad that you have that foundation and then Spots is building on.
Right. It's not pure teaching. The way I think about it is this: our curriculum is our sort of skeleton that we can hang other things off of. Like,
Yeah.
That's where you learn. Like, you don't have to participate with anything. You just self-learn through the curriculum by itself. That's fine. But if you have extra time, or if you're willing to work with others, then we have the structure in place that will fill in a lot more context and also address some of these other things that frankly is what I think expensive options pay for, like college. Why does college cost so much? Well, you get classrooms, you get buildings. It's the environment, right? Why do some of these boot camps cost so much? Well, because you get the synchronous environment where you can network with other people, you can sit next to other people. That costs money. It's very expensive. So if we can do that at the peer-to-peer level, then you can get 80-90% of the community of these in-person programs or these expensive programs at a price point, at a fractional price point, right? At our price point. And without sort of getting to pure peer-to-peer teaching, which I don't think that's very effective, right? So our curriculum is still sort of the skeleton there, serving the structure, the sequence, the depth, and everything else kind of has to fit that. So the Spot's goal is not to just present random topics. It's all within the context of our core curriculum. Okay, let's talk about the job hunt now. So let's talk about John first, since you went through capstone first. So John, I know for you and you and I talked about this a lot prior to coming in, even though, we had Tanner coming through, right? Still, you were the youngest, and currently still the youngest participant in capstone. And so, we talked about kind of the risks and the pros and cons of that and how we would deal with it. Do you want to talk about the job hunt process after capstone and sort of, just how that went at first?
Yeah, so I did have that particular disadvantage. I was pretty young. I graduated high school recently. I didn't have a degree or any college experience, actually, so I couldn't even list that. And I also had gone through launch school so quickly that it probably caused some suspicion, or at least filtering out, the resumes. So I had a little bit of an unconventional background. Here I was, 19 years old, trying to get a software engineering position after having finished launch school's capstone program, no degree. And it was difficult to take the more traditional route where I apply for jobs with a resume and a cover letter online, through whether that's AngelList or LinkedIn or just individual companies' websites. I was sending in lots of applications, but I wasn't getting any bites back, not even just for a single phone screen interview. I think I had maybe one, maybe two of those from applying in that fashion after 200 applications or so, or maybe it was more like 150. Point being, so I was spending a few months trying that. It wasn't really working, tweaking my resume, because turns out you probably actually don't want to list things related to high school in your resume when you're trying to do a professional job. Yeah, so initially I had some high school stuff in there. Nothing. I had no bites, no leads at all. And so we kind of took that out, because even though those were achievements that I was sort of proud of, it's just not applicable. And it kind of, I guess, gave the employers a bad taste in their mouth or something. But I found the most success by posting on a Hacker News thread they run every month called Ask HN, Who Wants to Be Hired? There's also a compliment thread for that called Ask HN, Who's Hiring? And so I posted on the Who Wants to Be Hired thread. This is a month, maybe a month and a half into the job hunt. I can't remember exactly. So after many failed applications and a couple phone screens and other interviews, I applied to, I posted on that Hacker News thread, Who Wants to Be Hired, listed a little bit more about myself, and left my email there. And this little startup in San Jose, California, emailed me called Reamaze, making software to help facilitate customer conversations. And it's a little bit interesting. I had finally gotten a little bit of a lead, and I'd gone through the interviews with them. I was also simultaneously going through the interview process with one or two other companies. But eventually I went through their interview process, got an offer, and I accepted because it was a pretty good role. But I just think it's
and a pretty good salary.
What?
And a pretty good salary, especially for 19, right?
Yeah. And for living in Salt Lake City, Utah, which isn't one of these giant high cost of living cities that you'll see like New York City or San Francisco, or even just like Miami or Austin or Seattle. It's still got quite a moderate cost of living over here. So in comparison to that, yeah, it's a pretty good salary. And so, yeah, I've been working with that California startup since.
And how long has it been? It's been...
So I started on November 2nd of 2020. And right now it's August 9th of 2021. So almost a year.
How has your performance been received, I guess, since they took a chance on you, you took a chance on them. They're a young company, you're a young engineer. What's been the feedback been?
I think they're actually overall impressed with me, and they're glad they hired me. I've been able to take on many big ticket items dealing with some of our, infrastructure or data. For example, migrating 20 million file attachments over from one backend to another without any downtime or service interruptions or service degradation. And so they kind of took a chance on me. Here I am, 19 years old, tasked with, it's kind of crazy when I think about it, but tasked with kind of these business critical projects, which actually are very, a lot. It also helped me to grow as an engineer on the job as well. But I was
imagine college, sophomore year, you probably would be working on some sort of, made up project. Instead, you're working on, production system.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, the money aside, of course, salary is going to be good and all that, but just the experience too, right? Much different. So good. And just to rewind a little bit, when you talked about your initial resume, I remember looking at your resume. Now, first of all, I have to say we have a lot of people in Capstone who don't have college degrees. And I don't think that itself was the problem. I actually think it was like the extreme youth, right? So most people who don't go to college been doing some other stuff, and it doesn't even have to be tech related. So we have lots of people with that profile. They were working in retail or the restaurant industry or something like that. Don't have a college degree.
Most people, you see, they have work history for like the past 10 years, even if they don't have a degree. But me, it's just blank.
I think the big change was, and this is probably my bad. I'll take some blame here. You have some really impressive high school credentials that at least I found impressive. I remember saying, hey, if I saw that, I would interview you because getting a 5 on a bunch of AP tests is not easy, right? You got a drum award. That's not an easy award to get. If I saw that, I would interview you. But I do think that listing like AP scores, even if they're good, it does send a signal that like you're super young, right? So usually
Yes.
resumes don't have any high school information on them at all. So even if they're impressive for you, it's like that's all you did. you did that and then did launch school, and here you are, right? So, but once we remove that, I actually think that things got a little bit easier, counterintuitively.
Yeah, it's a little bit interesting. There's a little bit of a hurdle you have to make from, I'm a student, I've graduated high school, now I'm learning and I finished capstone, to getting your first kind of professional job. And everybody has that hurdle, of course. I felt like it was slightly more difficult for me than it would have been otherwise had I had a few years of work experience or a CS degree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, employers soon trying to do pattern matching, right? So it's like there's this age discrimination usually on the higher end, right? But it's more like the more unlike you are other candidates, the more employers have to just sort of like feel like they're taking a chance on you a little bit.
Yeah, it's tough convincing them, even given my young age. I'm not a kid that doesn't know what they're doing.
Absolutely. You're the opposite of that. You know absolutely what you're doing. But yeah. So let's switch over to Adam. So Adam, you did the fall capstone cohort, which came after John. And so I guess John must have been getting his job or starting right when you were like in the middle of your capstone experience, right, Adam?
Yeah, that's right.
And then after, so the fall cohort will start there because of the holidays. We start our job hunt in January of the following year. So you did that. And what was that experience like?
Yeah, I think it was late January that I started that, or mid-January. My job hunt wasn't like John's experience because I benefited from the connection that I had with John in this small team, a small startup as VMAs was at the time. They operate more on trust, I think, right? And they're more casual. So I was going through interviews with a second company at the same time as VMAs. That was partly because I was starting to get in VMAs interviews, and VMAs just scheduled me for a bunch all at once on one day. Like it was an exhausting day, like 6 hours of interviews. So, and then it was over, right? Like they're a small company. They don't have time for a drawn out process. Mm-hmm. So I used that to try to accelerate the interview process at another company I was very interested in, another relatively small company. And they did accelerate it. But I didn't quite hear back from them before I decided to commit to VMAs. So my job hunt was very short. It was essentially 2 companies, and it was 3 weeks total.
Wow, 3 weeks total. And again, these are really good salaries. I mean, like you and John combined, I mean, we can say around $250,000 combined, right? It's crazy that we can use million as the measurement now. but so you ended up at VMAs as well with John, partly because John referred you and they trust John, but also because you did well on the interviews that they gave you. Okay. And you've been there, if John's been there for just under a year, you're there now maybe 6 months or so, is that right?
Yeah, let's see, just shy, 5.5 months, almost 6 months now.
Okay. And how do you feel you're doing? Are you getting good results? I mean, good performance feedback.
Yeah, I haven't got any notes, so to speak. Like I've done a tiny bit of improv, and they'll like give you notes if they have some feedback. I have a fairly laid back manager, the same manager that John has, and I think he did tell me once he had no doubts about my technical ability.
Really?
I haven't got a lot of feedback overall. Okay. He's very hands-off, and I frankly kind of like that, but I think it leans into my complacency a little bit, and I should probably initiate a little bit more communication. I really enjoy the asynchronous work environment that I'm in, though, where I have very few.
Where are you both? You're both still in Utah?
That's right. Yep. Yeah, we are both still in Utah, working for a Bay Area company. Utah companies, they don't pay as much, and I certainly would have some hesitancies for working for a Utah company in terms of company culture. But yeah, one thing that I really like about Readme is that I suggest people look for, if that's what they like, is a good engineering culture, meaning that they don't have you in a lot of meetings. In my last job as an analyst, I was in a fair few meetings, and especially my position before that. And as far as I'm concerned, the fewer meetings, the happier you are.
Yeah, sometimes bigger companies will have a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of process, a lot of inter-team communication, right, and intra-team communication as well. But being in a really small startup, high trust, people know how to work with each other, and you two being, on the same team in the same room together, huge. It just eliminates a lot of communication overhead. Now, your remakes did get acquired, so you're both officially employees of GoDaddy, a much larger company. How has that experience been? Even just under 1 year here of working with them, it sounds like you went through a lot. So, big company has some benefits, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, this is John speaking. And so the acquisition actually did go rather smoothly. It's as far as the day-to-day work and kind of culture goes, it's pretty much stayed the same. It still feels like the small company, the small startup that we were working for, it still feels like we're working for them today. We're still in the same team and working on the same things. Though we also have had a little bit of an increase in scope of work, regarding the acquiring company, integrating with their products. But I think it's gone quite well. I mean, still there's minimal meetings. I'm in maybe one meeting one meeting a week maximum. And of course I can just ping somebody on Slack or pull them over for a quick talk if I want to.
Maximum? Wow. That is a pleasure. That's nice. So they really protect your time in terms of letting you be focused and like async.
Giving me the freedom to just async work and be heads down and focused when I need it. But also, everyone there is great and ready to share their knowledge and talk if I want to as well.
Yeah.
This is Adam. I just want to interject about how awesome it is to work remotely and have this async meeting culture, because I'm not sure I can ever go back to 8 to 5, button seat sort of culture. So in that regard, the pandemic has had one benefit, in that it may have opened the eyes to employees and employers that remote culture can work.
Right.
Being able to, as long as, we're supposed to work 40 hours a week, of course, but it doesn't really matter. We don't have to be there from 9 on the dot to 5 on the dot. We can take 2 hours for lunch if we need to, maybe work an hour later, start at 10 and end at 6, or really what's best for our schedules, since it is kind of, an async culture where we're not in these constant meetings, which I think is fantastic.
And you two seem to have the best of both worlds, because sometimes when you're in that async remote environment, it can get very lonely, but you have each other and you're on the same team. So you can talk about work and sort of not lose that collaboration if you want it. So that's a really unique experience. Now, I'm kind of wondering, tying back to sort of what you said earlier when you were studying at law school, riding your bike to the library, eating peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and then playing tennis. You can still do that now, except now you're just, again, making around $250,000 together, just doing the same thing, right?
Yeah, of course, life can't be that simple forever, but it is great to still have mostly that kind of freedom and that feeling.
Yeah. And what does your grandmother say now in terms of, seeing you come through it on the other end?
Oh, I think she's reluctantly agreed that I've made the right choice, but she still wishes I went to university.
Well, did you tell her that you're enrolled in a bachelor's program now?
Oh yeah, I think she knows. So which is good. And she's good. She just wants me. The funny thing is, she, as Adam mentioned, lives across the street from the university campus. One of the reasons she bought a house there is she imagined that her grandchildren would kind of board with her and go up to the university up there. But
oh man.
So yeah.
That's funny. That's so funny. One more topic maybe I wanted to just ask, because I do get this question quite a bit from prospective law school people, or even people in law school. They're kind of wondering what the difference is between law school and a computer science degree. So both of you currently enrolled in computer science degrees. Adam's almost done. John, you're like a third of the way through, and both of you having finished law school to the end, seeing the end and working now, and also just working, John for 8 months, 9 months, Adam for 6 months. Yeah, maybe talk to us a little bit about that and share with people what you think there in terms of law school versus computer science and applicability to the industry.
Yeah, so this is John. A little bit of a disclaimer. I'm only a third of the way through, so I can't really say anything conclusive since I haven't gotten onto the later courses in my computer science degree. But law school and computer science degree curriculum, they do differ by quite a lot. And I found that so far, what I've learned in my computer science program, it doesn't really apply to my job. Law school, of course, is the opposite, in the sense that much of the stuff is directly applicable, or it kind of provides a gateway into learning the correct things in the right way. And so while still being a lot more rigorous than the computer science degree is actually, in my experience. And I think, Adam, you can expand more on that as well.
I would say law school is more rigorous than your computer science courses?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Adam. It is Western Governors University, so if you have the opportunity to go to Stanford's program or something, do it. But I think Western Governors is probably more typical of a larger number of colleges, courses in programs. It's a painful experience learning to program through their computer science program, right? Western Governors has not been a pleasant experience for me. I haven't hated it. Sometimes I enjoy the material, but there is no aspect of it that was well designed from the ground up, either for job suitability or pedagogically, which obviously go together. You need to really master something to do it on the job. I think that makes a huge difference. I have a cousin who did a computer science degree, and his heart wasn't in it from the beginning, but still, he was, if anything, like he was just not interested in working in the field after that degree. And that blows my mind because that's a lot of time. And I think one reason is just that degrees are often very unpleasant because it's apparent to students that what they're doing is a lot of times busy work, right? It's not essential to performing at their job. And right, by performing at their job, I don't just mean putting together another React button, but understanding the basis of their job. That's just not really true of CS degrees. So it's intrinsically less motivating. I see them as two very different categories. Law school, if you want to get good at something, and Western Governors, if you just need to check off a box.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was interrupting, but do you find it that it's almost easier to do a computer science degree now as a working engineer because you have more context for some of those more theoretical foundations, or?
I'll take that since John didn't start until after. I would say it is, but how I experience that is primarily confidence. Like I'm confident that I can do this larger Java course, one of the last courses in the program, but it's still a huge pain. Whereas previous to law school in Capstone, I did not have that confidence, right? And it wouldn't have been justified. So I think it's easier, but still painful.
Okay, so I don't want to put too much negativity on other people, more just like comparing contrasts, right? And I do think that, yeah, what you said is absolutely right. There's a large variance in different computer science programs out there. So computer science, period, is not a good phrasing either, right? But I do think in general, universities don't necessarily sequence their courses in a very friendly way. Mm-hmm. Professors, teach a topic, but they may teach it using one language, and then the next course will teach it in a different language because a different professor is teaching that course, and they may not even know that you don't know that language. So I think it can be disjointed. But yeah, I think that's maybe one of the differences in why something like law school can even exist, right? Obviously, if higher ed was called university specifically was filling this gap, law school wouldn't exist and it wouldn't need to exist. But yeah, I'm glad both of you took that chance on launch school. And I'm so happy, that now on the other end of it, you're reaping the benefits. And in the long run, you're going to have your degrees anyway, right? Adam's going to have 2 degrees. And
I think there's something about my personality that dislikes apparent purposelessness, or and what you described about courses being disjoint, going from one language to the next. That's definitely true of Western governors. I'm actually very pro college. If it's something like Stanford's program and I had the chance to do that right now, I might.
right.
I do look at how purposeful something seems, and so that's one reason that I'm so much more on the launch school side.
Right. Yeah. And I'm the same way. I'm definitely not anti-college or anything. I had a great time in college, but yeah, I think it's just there's more than one path, right? And I think people need to not always assume this is the way for every high school person to go. And also, I feel like just saying X% goes to college as a success criteria really allows colleges to abuse people, right? To not actually deliver what the goal of college is, because attending is success, right? So a lot of high schools, for example, will measure success that way, right? 80% of our graduates go to college as a point of success in itself. So yeah, so this has been a really, really meandering conversation. We covered a lot, sort of working together through capstone or launch school, core and capstone, hitting the job market with different profiles, working, skipping college, or doing college later. I shouldn't say skip college, it's doing college later, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, thanks so much for coming on. This has been a really, really interesting conversation. We'll see. We have somebody younger in the program, in the core curriculum, even younger than you, John. So we'll see if that person does capstone or not. But so far, you're the record.
Well, yeah, this is Adam. It's been a pleasure catching up. It's been a while. Very glad I ended up doing capstone, because now I get to worry about bigger, better problems in my life than what I'm going to do as a career or for money.
Like taxes, right? Get to worry about that.
Yeah, well, it's been a pleasure to be on, Chris, and to catch up. And I hope that my experience can enable younger folks to also consider maybe options that aren't just going straight into university right away, because you can take multiple different routes, like launch school, university, or the two together, just one before the other. And just realizing that other options are out there and they exist. Yeah, I hope that somebody can find this podcast and realize that.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, thank you. Have a good day.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.